My name is Riley Reeves and I'm 29 years old. 3 days ago, my mother held my engagement ring up to the light, laughed, and said, "This is what he could afford. Your father spent 3 months' salary on mine." Then she turned to my sister. "Show her yours again, sweetie." My fiancé was standing right behind her. He heard every word. What he did the next morning cost zero, but it cost my mother everything she had spent 30 years building. Before I tell you what happened, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story genuinely speaks to you, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I love knowing who's out there listening. Now, let me take you back to last Friday evening, the night my mother decided to test the wrong man's patience. Here's what you need to know about my family. My mother, Vivian Reeves, is 58. She has never held a paying job. And she will tell you that with pride. "My job is this family," she likes to say, usually willy-justing the centerpiece at whatever dinner party she's hosting at our house in Meadow Glen, a small suburb about 40 minutes outside Richmond. My father, Greg, is 60, retired civil engineer. Quiet, the kind of man who answers every question with whatever your mother wants and somehow believes that counts as parenting. Then there's Brooke, my older sister. 33, married to Tyler Langford, a junior partner at a litigation firm in the city. Brooke's wedding 5 years ago had 160 guests, a string quartet, and aring that catches light from across the room. 3 carats. Vivian mentions it at least once a month. And then there's me. I'm an emergency room nurse at Meadow Glen Community Hospital. I work 12-hour shifts. I've held a stranger's hand while they died. I've restarted hearts at 3:00 a.m. I pay my own rent, my own car note, my own student loans. I've done this since I was 22. Vivian has never once introduced me to her friends by saying, "My daughter is an ER nurse." It's always, "This is Riley." Or sometimes, "Riley's the independent one," which sounds like a compliment until you realize it's code for the one I couldn't control. There's a photo wall in my parents' living room. 7 photos of Brooke, graduation, wedding, honeymoon, Christmas portraits, 2 of me. One is a group family shot. The other is from when I was 11 holding a fish I caught at the lake. I know counting photos sounds pathetic, but when your mother counts everything, carats, salaries, square footage, you learn to count too. She's never called Nate by his name in front of her friends. It's always Riley's carpenter. I met Nate Hollies 3 years ago in the ER. He came in at midnight carrying a 20-year-old kid named Danny, one of his apprentices who'd put a nail through his palm on a job site. Nate had wrapped the hand in a clean shop rag and driven 40 minutes with his hazards on while I worked on Danny. Nate sat in the hallway for 4 hours, not on his phone, not packing, just sitting, waiting, because Danny didn't have family in town. And Nate said he shouldn't wake up alone. That's who Nate is. 31 owns a small custom furniture shop on Route 9. Builds dining tables, bookshelves, bed frames, all by hand, all by commission. He'll never be rich. He doesn't care. He measures success in sawdust and finished grain. 2 weeks ago, he proposed on the rooftop of his workshop. He'd strung lights across the beams himself. The same hands that shaped the ring box from a block of black walnut. The ring is white gold, simple band, and in the center a deep blue sapphire, small, maybe half a carat, but the color hits you. It looks like late sky just before the stars come through. I loved it. I loved it because it was nothing Vivian would ever choose. When I called Brooke to share the news, the first thing she said was, "How many carats?" I laughed. She didn't. Then she said, "Mom's going to have thoughts." She always does. No, I mean she's going to have thoughts about the ring specifically. Just be ready. I should have heard the warning in that. Instead, I thought maybe this time will be different. Maybe she'll see how happy I am. 29 years and I was still making that bet. I didn't yet know the full story behind the sapphire. Nate hadn't told me. And that story would end up changing everything. Friday evening, Vivian organized a small celebration dinner at the house. Her words, not mine. When Nate and I pulled into the driveway, I saw 2 extra cars I didn't recognize. Inside, sitting on the good sofa with wine already poured, were Linda Marsh and Margaret Bowen, Vivian's country club friends. The ones she lunches with every Thursday, the ones who know the price of everything and the meaning of nothing. "I thought this was family only," I whispered to Nate in the foyer. He squeezed my hand. "It's fine, I'm fine." The moment I walked into the dining room, Vivian reached for my left hand. She didn't hug me first, didn't say congratulations. She pulled my fingers toward the chandelier light and tilted the ring. 3 seconds of silence. Then that laugh, not cruel exactly, worse, pitying. "This is what he could afford." She looked at Greg, who was setting down a bread basket. He didn't look up. "Your father spent 3 months' salary on mine." Linda pressed her lips together. Margaret stared at her wine. Then Vivian turned to Brooke, who was standing by the hutch with Tyler. "Show her yours again, sweetie." Brooke hesitated. I saw it. A flicker of something in her eyes, but she held out her left hand anyway. The 3-carat diamond caught the chandelier and threw tiny rainbows across the tablecloth. Vivian smiled, the satisfied kind. I tucked my left hand beneath the table and felt 12 years old again. The familiar heat behind my eyes, the trained reflex to smile, to swallow, to perform. And here is the part that changed everything. Nate had come in through the back door. He was standing in the kitchen just past the half wall that separates it from the dining room. He'd heard my mother. He'd heard the laugh. He'd heard every single word. And when he stepped into the room, he didn't smile. Everyone froze. Linda sat her wine glass down. Margaret shifted in her seat. Greg kept his eyes locked on the bread basket like it held the answer to something. Nate didn't say a word. He walked to the empty chair next to mine, pulled it out, and sat down. His hand found the small of my back steady, warm. A single point of contact that said, "I'm here," without saying anything at all. Vivian recovered fast. She always does. "Nate, you madate." The hostess voice clicked on like a switch. Bright, polished. "I didn't hear you come in. Come sit." "Oh, you already are. Wonderful." She reached across the table to pat his hand. Nate let her, but he didn't return the gesture. He just looked at her, steady. No anger, no performance, just a man who was done pretending he hadn't heard what he'd heard. Vivian's smile thinned by a fraction. She noticed. I know she did because she immediately pivoted. "So Nate, tell Linda and Margaret about your little business." "He builds furniture," she said to Linda. "Isn't that creative? Custom furniture," Nate said. Right, custom." She waved her hand the way people wave away a detail that doesn't matter. The rest of the dinner moved the way Vivian's dinners always do. Her talking, the rest of us orbiting. She described the engagement party she was putting together at Pinehurst Country Club. 80 guests, flower arrangements, a champagne toast. I hadn't agreed to any of it. She hadn't asked. Brooke caught my eye once across the table. Her expression lasted less than a second, something close to guilt, something close to recognition before she looked away. After dessert, Nate and I said our goodbyes. He shook Greg's hand, nodded at Linda and Margaret, and guided me out the front door with his hands still on my back. He didn't speak until we were in the truck. Nate drives with both hands on the wheel. Always has. It's a carpenter thing. Hands are how he processes the world. That night, he drove with one hand. The other held mine on the center console, his thumb tracing slow circles across my knuckles. For 15 minutes, neither of us spoke. The truck hummed through Meadow Glen's dark back roads, past the feed store, past the closed library, past the elementary school where I used to sit on the swings and pretend my family was normal. I watched the street lights sweep across Nate's face. His jaw wasn't clenched. His eyes weren't hard. He just looked quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when someone's deciding something important. Finally, I broke the silence. "I'm sorry about her. Don't apologize for her. She does this. She's always done this. She doesn't mean Riley." His voice was gentle but firm. "She told Brooke to show you her ring right after laughing at yours." I opened my mouth to defend her again. The reflex was automatic, like pressing the wound tighter even though you know you're the one bleeding. "I know," I said instead. More silence. The turn signal clicked as we pulled onto our street. Inside the apartment, Nate hung his jacket on the hook by the door and stood in the kitchen for a long time. I waited on the couch, shoes off, ring catching the lamplight. Then he walked over and sat next to me close, knee to knee. Has she always been like this? The question landed like a stone in still water. 4 years of dinners, holidays, and Vivian's thinly veiled commentary, and Nate had never asked the question that plainly. Yes, I said. He nodded once, looked at the ring on my finger, looked at me. Okay, he said. Then tomorrow morning I'm going to call her. I stayed up after Nate fell asleep, sat at the kitchen table in the dark, turning the ring slowly on my finger. I kept hearing his voice. Has she always been like this? And my answer, yes, 29 years of yes. 29 years of holding her coat, laughing at her jokes, arriving early, staying late, picking the restaurant she liked, wearing the dress she approved of. All of it fed by one stubborn belief that if I just tried hard enough, one day she'd see me, really see me. That belief had a name. I'd learned it in nursing school. Sunk cost. The idea that because you've already invested so much, you can't walk away, even when the investment is clearly losing. I'd counseled patients about it. Told them gently, you don't owe more time to something that's already cost you too much. And there I was, sitting in the dark, owing 29 years. In the morning, Nate made coffee. He set a mug in front of me and leaned against the counter. Before I call her, he said, I want to ask you something. Okay. If a patient told you her mother said those words about her husband in front of guests, in front of her sister, what would you tell her? I looked at the steam curling off my coffee. I knew the answer. I'd said it dozens of times in the ER to women sitting on gurneys, clutching their purses, eyes red, telling me it's not that bad. I'd tell her it's emotional abuse, I said. Nate didn't nod. Didn't say I told you so. He just looked at me. I don't want our daughter growing up thinking her mother's worth is measured by a ring, he said. That broke something loose. I cried not from sadness, but from the relief of hearing someone say the thing I'd known for years and never let myself think. What are you going to say to her? I asked. The truth. I'll give her a chance to make it right. Saturday morning, 8:00 a.m., I sat on the couch with my coffee while Nate dialed from the kitchen. Speaker off, but our apartment is small and I could hear every word. Good morning, Mrs. Reeves. Do you have a minute? Of course, sweetheart. Vivian's voice was warm, performance warm. What's on your mind? Last night I heard what you said about the ring. A pause, 1 second, 2. I don't know what you think you heard. You held it up and said this is what he could afford. Nate, honey, that was a joke. Riley is too sensitive. She always has been. You asked Brooke to show her ring. Right after longer pause, I heard the faint clink of what I imagine was Vivian setting down her coffee mug. The sound a person makes when they realize the conversation isn't going where they planned. Then the shift. I knew it was coming, the pivot to victim. I have done nothing but welcome you into this family. Her voice climbed half an octave. And this is how you repay me, calling to accuse me. I'm not accusing you. I'm telling you what I heard. If my daughter has a problem with me, she can tell me herself. She has, Nate said. For 29 years, you haven't listened. The line went silent. 3 seconds. 4, 5 click. She hung up. I stared at the phone in Nate's hand. He set it on the counter and looked at me. No triumph on his face. No anger either, just the steady expression of a man who offered an open door and watched someone slam it. 40 minutes later, my phone rang. Vivian. I picked up expecting tears. Maybe a grudging half apology. Instead, I got a command. You need to control your fiancé before he destroys this family. Mom, he called to talk. You hung up on him. He attacked me, Riley, at 8:00 a.m. on a Saturday. He repeated what you said. That's not an attack. I am your mother. Her voice dropped into that register. The one that's supposed to end arguments. I shouldn't have to defend myself to a carpenter. The word landed. Carpenter. She said it the way someone says pest or stain. Mom, you laughed at my ring in front of your friends. I was surprised. There's a difference. You compared it to Dad's salary because I want better for you. A sharp breath. Is that a crime? I closed my eyes. This is the cycle. She insults, you react. She reframes the insult as love. And suddenly you're the one apologizing for being hurt. I've watched it happen 1,000 times. I've participated in it 1,000 times. Not today. Mom, Nate gave you a chance to acknowledge what you said. You hung up instead. Silence, then the ultimatum. If Nate doesn't apologize by Saturday, the engagement party is off. I didn't ask you to plan that party. 80 people are already invited, Riley. Her voice went cold. You will not humiliate me. I almost laughed. Almost. The idea that I could humiliate her, that I had that kind of power in her world, was so far from anything I'd ever experienced that it felt absurd. I have to go, Mom. Riley, I have to go. I hung up, set the phone face down on the table. My hands were shaking, not from fear. I dealt with combative patients, with code blues, with families screaming in the hallway at 3:00 a.m. This was different. For the first time in 29 years, I was genuinely angry at my mother. Not disappointed, not resigned, angry, and I didn't push it down. Within 2 hours, the phone became a weapon. Brooke called first. Riley, Mom's crying, you know how she gets. A pause. Can't Nate just call and smooth things over? Brooke. She laughed at my ring. I know. I was there, but you know how she is. That phrase again, you know how she is. The family password for don't challenge the system. Then a text from Greg. Sweetheart, your mother is upset. If everyone just apologized, we could move past this. Everyone. As if multiple people had done something wrong. As if the offense were distributed equally. Classic Greg. So desperate for quiet that he'd split the blame down the middle, even when one side held all of it. Then, and this one actually surprised me, a text from Linda Marsh, Vivian's friend. Honey, your mom is so excited about the party. Don't let a misunderstanding ruin this. I stared at Linda's message for a long time. Vivian had called her club friends before she called her own husband. She'd assembled her witnesses, framed her version of events, and deployed them in under 2 hours. That's not grief. That's a campaign. Nate watched me scroll through the messages. He didn't interrupt. He just set a fresh cup of coffee in front of me and sat down across the table. I was about to close my phone when I scrolled past something else. An old text thread with Brooke from 2 Christmases ago. One message I'd screenshotted on instinct and never deleted. Mom said Tyler's Christmas gift to her was thoughtless. Please don't tell anyone. I'd forgotten about it. Brooke had deleted the message from her end within an hour. But there it was, proof that Vivian's scoreboard didn't spare anyone, not even the golden child's husband. Saturday afternoon, Nate and I sat at the kitchen table. The oak one he'd built the summer we moved in together. 2 mugs, my laptop open between us. I've been trying for 29 years, I said. 1 more year isn't going to change anything. I don't want revenge, Nate said. I just think they deserve the truth. Here's what we decided. Nate would write an email addressed to Vivan, copied to Greg, Brooke, and Tyler. 4 things. First, a clear account of what Vivian said at dinner. Her exact words, the laugh, the comparison to Brooke Unk's ring. Second, the story behind the sapphire, the full story, the one Nate hadn't told anyone outside of me. Third, that we would not be attending the engagement party at Pinehurst. Fourth, that our wedding would be planned by us, and that Vivan was welcome as a guest, not as an organizer. No insults, no threats, no dramatics, just facts delivered plainly, the way you'd file an incident report. I read the draft 3 times. I kept looking for the angry part, the jab, the sarcasm, the line that went too far. It wasn't there. Every sentence was measured, every word earned. There was one paragraph that stopped me. The sapphire in Riley's ring belonged to migrandmother Ruth Hollies. She wore it on a chain around her neck for 41 years. Her husband, George, my grandfather, a carpenter like me, chose it because he said it was the color of the sky on the day they met. Ruth passed in 2002. I've carried that stone since I was 15. It is the most valuable thing I own, not in dollars, in meaning. I looked at Nate. He looked at me. Send it, I said. He pressed the button at 10:47 a.m. The email took 2 seconds to deliver. The fallout took 3 days to fully surface. I'm going to pause here for a second. If you've ever sent a message, a text, an email, even just one sentence that changed everything in your family, hit that like button right now, because I know what it feels like to hover over send for 10 minutes straight knowing there's no taking it back. If you're watching this and thinking, I wish I had the guts to send that email. Maybe someone in the comments has been where you are. Drop your story below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time because what happened after Nate hit send? That's where this story really begins. After the email went out, Nate and I sat on the porch. The morning was cool, the kind of early spring quiet where you can hear the neighbor's wind chimes 2 houses over. That's when he told me the full story. His grandmother's name was Ruth Hollies. She married George Hollies in the fall of 1961 in a courthouse ceremony with 6 witnesses and no photographer. George was a carpenter, 3rd generation, same as Nate. He worked with his hands 6 days a week and spent Sundays rebuilding the porch of the house they rented on Miller Road. He couldn't afford a diamond. He couldn't afford much of anything that year, but he walked into a jeweler on Main Street with his pay envelope and asked to see the smallest sapphire they had. "Why a sapphire?" the jeweler asked. "Because it's the color of the sky on the morning I met her," George said. Ruth wore that sapphire on a chain around her neck every single day for 41 years. Through 3 kids, 2 layoffs, 1 house fire, and a husband who came home smelling like wood shavings every night until the day he died. Ruth passed in 2002. Nate was 15. She left him 2 things, a set of woodworking chisels and the sapphire necklace. He'd carried the stone in a velvet pouch inside his toolbox for 16 years. Every shop he opened, every bench he built, it was in the drawer, waiting. When he decided to propose, he took the stone to a jeweler in town and had it set in a white gold band he'd sketched himself. "Your mother looked at that ring," Nate said, and saw a price tag. He stared out at the street. "My grandmother looked at it every day for 41 years and saw the sky." I realized then that Vivian hadn't just insulted a piece of jewelry. She'd laughed at a dead woman's love story. And now, because of the email, everyone in my family knew it. That afternoon, I went back through old photos on my phone, not looking for anything specific, just doing what people do when everything shifts and you start re-examining the past through a cleaner lens. I found the screenshot from 2 Christmases ago. Brooke's text. "Mom said Tyler's gift was thoughtless. Please don't tell anyone." I remembered that Christmas. Tyler had given Vivian a set of professional-grade kitchen knives, the German kind, carbon steel, beautiful handles. Vivian cooked constantly. It seemed perfect. She opened the box, held one up, turned it over. 5 seconds of silence. "Well," she said, "I suppose it's the thought that counts." Then she looked at Greg. "Your father got me a trip to Savannah." Tyler's face went red. Not embarrassed red, the red of a man swallowing something he knew he'd taste for years. Brooke grabbed his hand under the table and whispered a single word. "Don't." I remember thinking at the time that Tyler was being oversensitive, that Vivian was just being Vivian, that families say things they don't mean during the holidays. Sitting on my couch now, 2 years later, I see it differently. Vivian didn't just reject Tyler's gift. She ranked it. She placed it below Greg's on purpose in front of the whole family. The same way she ranked my ring below Brooke's. The same playbook, the same scoreboard. Brooke had asked me not to tell anyone. She deleted the message within an hour, but I'd saved it. I'm not sure why at the time. Maybe some part of me already knew it mattered. Now I looked at that screenshot and understood something bigger. Vivian didn't have a favorite daughter. She had a system. Brooke was the display case. I was the cautionary tale. Tyler was collateral, and anyone who married into this family got measured by the same invisible ruler. The screenshot stayed on my phone. I had a feeling it would matter again soon. 3 hours after the email, my phone buzzed. Greg, I almost didn't pick up. Every call that day had been someone telling me to apologize, to smooth it over, to be the bigger person, which in my family has always meant be the quieter person. But something in me said, answer. "Hey, Dad." I read Nate's email. His voice sounded tired. Not angry tired, the deeper kind. The kind that's been building for decades. "Dad, I'm sorry if don't apologize, Riley." That stopped me. In 30 years of phone calls with my father, I had never once heard him say, "Don't apologize." His default was the opposite. "Say sorry, keep the peace, let your mother calm down." "I just need to ask you one thing," he said. "Did your mother really say that about the ring, about the salary?" "Yes." The silence that followed was the longest 8 seconds of my life. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway of the house I grew up in. The one Vivian picked out. The one Greg wound every Sunday morning. I need to think, he said. Then he hung up. I need to think. Not I'll talk to your mother. Not it'll blow over. Not let's all just calm down. I need to think. From a man who hadn't independently processed a family conflict in 3 decades, those 4 words were seismic. An hour later, Vivian called. Her voice was different, colder, controlled. Did you send that email? No, Nate did. Same thing. It's not the same thing, Mom. Your father won't talk to me. He's been in the garage since lunch. Are you happy now? I didn't answer that because the honest answer that a small, exhausted part of me was felt too complicated to say out loud. Happy has nothing to do with it, I said. The truth just has consequences. She hung up without saying goodbye. Wednesday, 3 days before the party, a message dropped into the family group chat. Vivian had added Linda and Margaret to the thread, which told me everything about who this performance was for. Engagement party for Riley is still on for Saturday at Pinterest. There's been a small misunderstanding, but this family always works things out. Can't wait to celebrate. I read it was, then a 3rd time. She hadn't mentioned that I'd told her I wasn't coming. She hadn't mentioned the email. She hadn't mentioned any of it. Instead, she was betting that I would show up because 80 people expected me to. That I would fold the way I always folded because the social cost of defiance would be too high. Nate read it over my shoulder. She's using the crowd, he said quietly. If you don't show, she tells 80 people you're the ungrateful daughter who ruined her own party. Hugh was right. That was the trap. Show up and submit or stay home and be the villain in Vivan's version of events. I called Brooke. Did you see Mom's text? Yeah. A pause. She told me everything was resolved. Brooke, nothing is resolved. I told her we're not coming. Another pause. Longer. She said, you apologized. I let that sit. Let Brooke hear the weight of what she just repeated. She lied. Brooke, I heard Brooke exhale. The sound of someone whose comfortable story has just been pulled out from under her. I didn't know, she said. I know you didn't. So, what are you going to do? I looked at Nate. He was leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, not deciding for me. Waiting. We're going to show up, I said. Brooke was quiet. Not to play along, I added. If she behaves, it'll be fine. If she doesn't, I'm not going to pretend anymore. Saturday morning, the day of the party, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and put on a navy blue dress. Simple, fitted, no jewelry except the sapphire ring. No earrings, no necklace. I wanted people to see the ring and nothing else. Nate wore a white button-down and dark slacks. He'd ironed them himself. When he rolled his sleeves to the elbow, I could see the fine scars on his forearms from years of woodworking. Tiny silver lines that mapped a life built with his hands. We didn't talk much on the drive to Pinterest. The plan was simple. Go be present, be gracious. If Vivan kept it civil, we'd keep it civil. The email had already said everything that needed saying. This wasn't about making a scene, but if she pushed, if she used the microphone, the crowd, the toast, then I would respond calmly, truthfully. Once Nate reached over and squeezed my hand at the last stoplight before the club. We're not going there to win, he said. We're going so we don't have to hide. I nodded. My chest was tight, but my hands were steady. Training. When the situation is critical, your body knows how to get quiet. The parking lot at Pinterest was nearly full. I counted cars out of habit. A nervous tick. 60, maybe 70 vehicles. Vivian had filled the room. Through the glass doors, I could see white flowers on every table, a banner strung across the back wall, champagne flutes catching the overhead light. The banner read, "Congratulations, Riley and Nate," and underneath in slightly smaller script. The kind of detail only Vivan would insist on, hosted by Vivan and Greg Reeves. Her name was first, of course it was. Nate held the door open. I walked in. 80 faces turned toward us, and behind the podium, already holding a microphone, stood my mother. Vivian intercepted us at the entrance like a diplomat meeting foreign dignitaries at the border. She hugged me, held it a beat too long, the kind of hug designed for an audience. Over her shoulder, I saw Linda and Margaret watching from the nearest table, wine glasses already half empty. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," Vivian whispered, then quieter so only I could hear. "Smile. Don't you dare ruin this." She released me and turned to Nate with the full wattage hostess smile. "Nate, so glad you came. Come in, come in." For the next 20 minutes, Vivian orbited the room like a satellite, steering every introduction. She presented Nate to her friends the same way every time. "This is Nate, Riley's fiancé. He builds furniture." "Isn't that creative? Creative?" She used the word 4 times in 20 minutes. Each time with the same inflection, the one that sounds like a compliment but sits in the mouth like a consolation prize. I watched the guests' faces as they shook Nate's hand. Most of them smiled politely. A few glanced at me with something that might have been sympathy. When people asked to see the ring, Vivian stepped in before I could extend my hand. "It's a sapphire," she said. "Very unique. Not everyone goes traditional, and that's perfectly fine." Perfectly fine. 2 words that have never once meant fine in the history of the English language. Nate's hand found mine under the table, his thumb pressed against my palm, steady, grounding. I scanned the room. Brooke sat 3 tables away with Tyler. She was watching Vivian, her expression unreadable. Tyler stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Greg stood near the bar, holding a club soda he wasn't drinking. He caught my eye once and looked away. Vivian hadn't made her move yet. She was building to something. I could feel it the way you feel pressure drop before a storm. At 7:15, Vivian tapped the microphone twice. The room hushed. She stood behind the podium in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her hair was perfect. Her lipstick was perfect. She held the mic with both hands. The way a woman holds something she believes belongs to her. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight to celebrate my baby girl's engagement. Warm applause. Smiles around the room. When Riley told me she was engaged, I wish she paused, tilted her head, let the beat land. "Surprised," she said. Surprised the way a surgeon says complication, technically neutral, emotionally devastating. But love comes in all shapes and sizes. Her eyes dropped to my hand on the table, to the ring, and sometimes all budgets. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter. Linda covered her mouth. A man at the far table chuckled, then stopped when his wife elbowed him. Vivan pressed on, voice smooth as silk on marble. I raised my girls to aim high. Brooke married a man who gave her the moon. She gestured toward Brooke and Tyler. Tyler didn't move. Riley found someone who gives her handmade furniture. She paused, let it breathe. And honestly, that's its own kind of charm. The room was quiet now, the wrong kind of quiet. The kind that happens when people realize they're witnessing something they'll talk about in their cars on the way home. Vivian raised her glass. "Riley and Nate, may you build something sturdy." A few glasses went up, most hesitated. Tyler's stayed on the table. Brooke's hand was frozen halfway. I looked at Nate. His face was calm. Still, he met my eyes and gave a single small nod. Not permission, recognition. "This is the moment. You already know what to do." I set my glass down, pushed my chair back, and stood up. 80 people looked at me. I felt every pair of eyes. The chandelier hummed above. A glass clink-egged somewhere near the bar. Otherwise, silence. "Thank you, Mom, for that toast." My voice didn't waver. 12-hour shifts in the ER teach you how to speak clearly when everything inside you is shaking. "I'd like to add something if that's okay." Vivian's smile froze. She couldn't object, not in front of 80 people. She stepped aside from the podium with a gracious nod that didn't reach her eyes. I didn't take the mic. I didn't need it. The room was small enough and quiet enough that my voice carried on its own. The sapphire in this ring belonged to Ruth Holly's. I held up my left hand. The blue stone caught the light, not like a diamond, not in scattered rainbows, but in a single deep glow like the last color before nightfall. She wore it for 41 years. A murmur moved through the room. People leaned forward. Her husband, George, Nate's grandfather, was a carpenter. He couldn't afford a diamond, so he chose a sapphire the color of the sky. On the morning they met, I looked at Nate. He was watching me with an expression I'll carry for the rest of my life. Pride, love, and the quiet steadiness of a man who trusts you completely. I know this ring isn't 3 carats. I didn't look at Brooke. It didn't need to. But it carries 41 years of a marriage that lasted, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in this room. The silence that followed was different from the one after Vivian's toast. This one had weight, the good kind. Then, from the back of the room, a woman stood. Helen Collins, 70 years old, country club board member since before I was born. She raised her glass. To Riley and Nate, she said. And to Ruth, 40 glasses went up, then 50, then the rest. Vivian raised hers last. Her hand trembled. The party ended the way parties end when something real has happened. Quickly and with too many handshakes. People filed out in clusters. I stood near the door shaking hands, accepting hugs from women I barely knew who squeezed my arm and said things like, "That was lovely, dear, and you've got a good one." Margaret Bowen, who'd been at the dinner where it all started, stopped in front of me, took both my hands and said, "Your grandmother-in-law sounds like she was something special." She said it to me, not to Vivian. Vivian was 5 tea away, and Margaret walked past her. That small geography told the whole story. Once the room cleared, Vivian caught me in the hallway outside the coat check. Her mask was off. No hostess smile, no warm inflection, just her face stripped tight, furious. "Are you satisfied?" she said. "You just humiliated me in front of 80 people. Mom, I didn't say a single word about you. I talked about the ring. Everyone knows it was aimed at me. Then maybe what you said was worse than what I said." Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. I watched her cycle through 3 responses before landing on the default. "Your father will hear about this. Dad already read the email. Mom, he's known since Tuesday." Something shifted behind her eyes, a calculation crumbling. She hadn't known that Greg had read the email. Or if she had, she'd assumed he'd already sided with her the way he always did. Before she could respond, Greg appeared in the doorway. He looked at Vivian the way a man looks at a road he's driven 1,000 times and is suddenly seeing clearly. "Vivian," he said, "we need to talk when we get home." No volume, no edge, just a sentence from a man who for the first time in 30 years was not saying everything will be fine. Vivian stared at him. Then she picked up her coat and walked to the car without a word. 10:00 that night, Nate was in the shower. I was on the couch with a cup of tea I wasn't drinking when my phone lit up. "Brooke," I almost let it ring. Every call from Brooke in the past week had been a variation of, "Please just smooth it over." But something in me, maybe the same instinct that made me screenshot her text 2 years ago, said pick up. Hey. Her voice was different, quieter. None of the performative calm she usually wraps around family conflict like tissue paper around broken glass. Tyler read the email. I know he was at the party. He hasn't said a word all evening. A breath. Riley, that never happens. Tyler always has something to say. I waited. Let the silence work. "Do you remember Christmas 2 years ago?" she asked. "Tyler's gift. The knives. Mom told me afterward privately in the kitchen. If Tyler were a real provider, he would have given me something I could show my friends. He's a litigation partner, Riley. He bills $400 an hour, and she told me his gift wasn't good enough to display." I pressed my hand against the couch cushion. "You texted me about it." "I know. I deleted it." It didn't. Silence. Then a sound I almost didn't recognize. Brooke. The composed one, the polished one, the daughter who never cracked, was crying. "I thought I was the favorite," she said. "I thought I was safe, but I wasn't the favorite. I was just the one who obeyed, and that's not the same thing." I closed my eyes, 29 years of feeling invisible. And here was Brooke telling me that being seen by Vivian wasn't the prize I thought it was. The golden child's cage was just Janier. "Tyler wants to meet Nate," she said. "He wants to talk to the only person in this family who had the guts to say it out loud." Sunday morning, I drove to the grocery store on Oak Street, the one with the good produce section and the terrible parking lot. I was comparing tomatoes when I heard a voice behind me. Riley Reeves, Helen Collins, the woman who'd stood up at the party and toasted Ruth. She was holding a basket with 2 lemons and a bag of flour, dressed like she was heading to church, which she probably was. "Mrs. Collins, good morning. I want you to know something." She set her basket down and looked at me directly. Helen Collins is the kind of woman who makes eye contact like it's a handshake. "Your speech last night was the most genuine thing I've heard at that club in 20 years. I didn't know what to say, so I said, 'Thank you. I've known your mother a long time.'" She continued, "She's talented. She's organized, and she puts on a beautiful event." But last night, what she said during that toast, people noticed. I felt my stomach tighten. What are people saying? Helen tilted her head. Nobody's calling her a bad person if that's what you're worried about. They're saying she seemed out of touch. And in that circle, dear, that's worse. She was right. In the country club world, being called cruel is dramatic and temporary. Being called out of touch is quiet and permanent. It means you've lost the room. Your mother called me yesterday morning, Helen added, wanted to explain her side of things. I told her there was nothing to explain. What she said at the podium was clear enough. She picked up her basket and patted my arm. Honey, in this town, people forgive all sorts of things, but laughing at a dead woman's ring that sticks. She walked toward the checkout line. I stood there in the produce aisle holding a tomato, understanding for the first time that Vivian's world, the one she'd built on appearances and comparisons, was starting to notice the cracks. Monday afternoon, I stopped by my parents' house to pick up a box of old photos, childhood pictures I wanted for the wedding. Greg answered the door. His eyes were red around the edges, not fresh crying. The kind that comes from 2 nights of poor sleep and too much thinking. Mom, here, I asked. Upstairs. He said it the way you say, closed. No elaboration, no invitation to visit. He handed me the photo box from the hall closet. Then he stood in the doorway, holding the door half open, looking at me like he was searching for permission to say something he'd rehearsed. Riley. Yeah, Dad, I'm sorry. I blinked. Greg Reeves does not apologize. Greg Reeves says, let's move on and let it go. And your mother means well. Greg Reeves has spent 35 years as a buffer between Vivian and reality. An apology was not in his vocabulary. Sorry for what? For 29 years of knowing she did this. He paused, his jaw worked. And telling you it would be fine. I set the box down on the porch step and hugged him. He held on longer than he ever has, long enough that I felt his shoulders shake once, then steady. I told your mother last night. He said she needs to call both you girls. A real apology, no conditions. He paused. If she won't, I'm in the guest room. I told her that. What did she say? Nothing. She went upstairs. When? Saturday night. 2 days. Vivian Reeves, the woman who could not be alone in a room for 20 minutes without calling someone, had been upstairs for 2 days. I picked up the box of photos, looked up at the second floor window. The blinds were drawn. I didn't know if she was falling apart or regrouping. With Vivian, it could be either. Let me ask you something real quick. Have you ever heard your parent give you a genuine no excuses apology? Not, I'm sorry you feel that way. Not, I'm sorry, but you have to understand a real one. If you have, tell me what it felt like in the comments. And if you haven't, you're not alone. I waited 29 years. Sometimes the apology never comes, and you have to learn to be okay with that. If this story is hitting close to home, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And stay with me because what my mother did next surprised even me. Wednesday. 1 week after the party, my phone rang while I was charting at the nurse's station. Vivian. I stepped into the break room and answered. Riley, I've been thinking. Her voice was different, slower, stripped of its usual polish. I want to see you and Nate, both of you. Why to talk? I know I said some things that were too much. Too much, not wrong, not cruel, too much. Even in retreat, Vivian edited. Okay, I said. We'll meet you at Thornton's on Main Street Saturday morning. Why not the house? 'Cause I'm choosing the location this time. A pause, then fine. Saturday, Thornton's Coffee, a corner booth by the window. Vivian arrived first. I saw her car in the lot when Nate and I pulled in. She was sitting with her hands around a mug, no makeup, hair pulled back in a clip. I'd never seen her in public without her face done. It startled me more than anything she could have said. We sat down. Nate ordered black coffee. I ordered nothing. My hands needed to be empty for this. Vivian spoke first. I'm sorry for the way I made you feel. There it was, the way I made you feel. Not for what I said, not for what I did, for how you reacted to it. Nate leaned forward. Mrs. Reeves, can I ask what specifically are you sorry for? She blinked, for the misunderstanding. There wasn't a misunderstanding, Nate said. His voice was the same as it always was. Quiet, even no heat. You said my ring wasn't good enough. You compared it to your son-in-law's. You did it in front of your friends. Vivian's mouth opened, closed. I reached across the table, not to comfort her, to finish what Nate started. Mom, I'm sorry you were hurt is not the same as I'm sorry I hurt you. She stared at me for the first time. There was no comeback loading behind her eyes. Vivian didn't speak for 30 seconds. I know because I counted. It's what I do when I'm trying to stay present. The coffee shop hummed around us. Someone's spoon clink-egged against a ceramic mug. The espresso machine hissed. Then Vivian said something I'd never heard her say. When your father proposed to me, my mother held the ring up and said, "Well, at least he got you a proper one." I felt the air shift. Nate set his coffee down. "That was the only nice thing my mother ever said about your father. The only one." Vivan's voice was small, the smallest I'd ever heard it. She measured everything. The house, the car, his salary. She measured him every single day of their marriage, and she found him lacking every single time. Mom, I hated her for it. Vivian's eyes went red, not dramatic red, not for show red, the raw kind. I hated that she couldn't just be happy for me, and I swore I wouldn't do that to my children. She pressed her fingers against the table edge, her knuckles whitened. But the ring was the one thing she approved of, and I held on to that. The idea that the ring proved I'd done something right. I held on to it for 35 years. She looked at me. I didn't even realize I'd turned into her. The coffee shop kept moving around us. 2 women laughed at the counter. A child dropped a spoon. Nate spoke first, gently. "I'm sorry about your mother, Mrs. Reeves." Vivian looked at him, really looked. Maybe for the first time since they'd met. "You're kinder than I gave you credit for." I held my mother's hand across the table. "Mom, I understand why you think the way you do, but I'm not grandma and Nate isn't dad." She nodded. "No defense, no pivot. I need time," she said. That was honest. And for now, honest was enough. Before we left Thornon's, I said what I'd come to say. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I spoke the way I speak to a patient's family when the news is serious and the moment requires clarity. "Mom, here's how this works going forward." Vivian looked up. Her hands were still wrapped around the mug. The coffee had gone cold 20 minutes ago. "The wedding is ours. Nate and I plan it. Nate and I pay for it. You are invited as a guest, and I want you there. But you are not the organizer. You don't pick the venue. You don't approve the flowers. You don't manage the guest list." She didn't interrupt. "Second, the comparisons stop. No more measuring Nate against Tyler. No more ranking gifts or salaries or ring sizes. If it happens again, I will leave immediately. Not a discussion." Nate put his hand on the table. "Open." I placed mine on top of it. "Third. And this one's for me, not for you." I took a breath. I'm not going to wait until I'm 58 to stop repeating this cycle. If we have kids, they will never hear their grandmother rank their parents. That's not a request. It's a line. The air between us was still. Vivian looked at my hand on Nate's at the sapphire, catching the morning light through the window. "I love you, Mom, but I won't accept love that comes with a scorecard." Vivan pressed her lips together, not the thin line press of anger I'd seen 1,000 times. This was the press of someone holding something in something fragile. "Okay," she said. Nate spoke for the first time in several minutes. "Mrs. Reeves, I want you at our wedding, but I want it to be about Riley and me, not about anyone's expectations." Vivian nodded. Then she glanced at the ring one more time. "It really is a nice color," she said quietly. It wasn't a grand gesture, but from Vivan, it was a first step. That weekend, Tyler called Nate and asked if he wanted to grab a beer. I wasn't there. I only know what happened because Nate told me afterward, sitting on the tailgate of his truck in our driveway, peeling the label off a bottle and smiling in a way I hadn't seen before, like he'd found a teammate he didn't know he needed. They went to Sullivan's, the sports bar on Route 4 with the sticky tables and the jukebox that only plays 90s country. 2 men who'd married into the same family sitting across from each other for the first time without Vivian in the room. Tyler started. "I want to thank you." "For what?" "For saying it out loud. I've wanted to for 5 years." Tyler told Nate about the knives. About the time Vivian said he was lucky Brooke chose him in front of Brooke's college roommates at a brunch as if it were a joke. About the slow accumulation of small cuts that never quite healed because Brooke always asked him to let it go. "She told me not to make waves," Tyler said. "And I love her, so I swallowed it." "That's not weakness," Nate said. "That's loyalty." "Maybe." Tyler turned his glass slowly. "But loyalty shouldn't mean swallowing your mother-in-law's contempt and pretending it's dinner conversation." They didn't toast to victory. They didn't toast to revenge. They clink-egged glasses to something quieter. The decision to stop pretending that silence was the same as peace. When Nate came home and told me, I sat with it for a long time. Family I thought I knew, the one with clear roles and rigid hierarchies, was shifting. Brooke was calling me more. Tyler was speaking up. Greg was holding a line. Even Vivian was sitting with silence instead of filling it. Nothing had been fixed, but something had cracked open, and for the first time the light was getting in. 2 weeks later, the fallout landed where Vivian lived, her social world. She quietly resigned from the fall gala planning committee at Pinterest. The official reason was personal time. The real reason came through Brooke, who heard it from Tyler, who heard it from a colleague whose wife sat on the board. Margaret Bowen had pulled Vivian aside after a Thursday lunch and said gently but clearly, "Vivian, maybe take this season off." In club language, that's not a suggestion, it's a verdict. Linda Marsh, Vivian's closest friend for 15 years, stopped returning calls with her usual speed. Vivian invited her to lunch twice. Linda was swamped both times. That kind of swamped that means I'm not ready to sit across from you yet. Nobody called Vivian a monster. Nobody posted about it or whispered her name across restaurant tables. The suburban social system doesn't work that way. It works through absences. The empty chair at the planning meeting, the unreturned voicemail, the invitation that doesn't come. Death by 1,000 quiet omissions. Greg, meanwhile, slept in the guest room for 3 nights. Then he moved back, but with conditions. Vivian would see a therapist, not couples counseling, individual. "Someone who isn't me and isn't your daughters," he said. She agreed. I don't know if that agreement was genuine or strategic. Vivian has spent a lifetime agreeing to things in order to regain control, but the fact that she said yes, that she didn't storm out, didn't cry, didn't call it an attack, told me something had shifted beneath the surface. I didn't celebrate any of it. There's no joy in watching your mother lose her friends, but I also didn't feel guilty. I didn't cause this. She did. I just stopped covering for her. That's not cruelty. That's the cost of truth in a family that ran on fiction. A month after the party, I stopped by the house unannounced. Greg was at the hardware store. The front door was unlocked. Vivian never locks it during the day, a small town habit she refuses to break. I found her in the kitchen alone, standing at the stove, stirring a pot of something with her back to me. The radio was off. The TV was off, just the sound of a wooden spoon moving slowly through sauce. She didn't turn around when she heard me come in. She just said, "There's enough for 2 if you want." I sat down at the kitchen island. She set a plate in front of me without ceremony. Pen with her red sauce, the one she made every Friday when Brooke and I were little. The one I used to request for my birthday. The one I hadn't eaten in years because somewhere along the way, Vivian stopped making it. She sat across from me with her own plate. We ate in silence for a while. The sauce tasted exactly the way I remembered. Garlic, basil, a little heat at the back. "Mom," I said, "I don't know what things are going to look like between us, but I'm not going to disappear." She set her fork down, looked at me. "You should," she said. "I deserve it. You deserve to be called out. You don't deserve to be abandoned. Those are 2 different things." Her chin trembled. Just once, just barely, and then she studied it. Vivian Reeves does not cry in kitchens, but she came close. "I started seeing the therapist Greg found," she said. "Dr. Mercer, she's direct. Good. She asked me to list the things I'm proud of that have nothing to do with other people's achievements." Vivian picked up her fork again. I couldn't think of a single one. I didn't say anything. Some truths need space, not commentary. We finished the pasta. She washed the dishes. I dried. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. It was 2 women standing side by side doing something ordinary with something broken between them that might one day mend. Nate and I chose our venue on a Tuesday evening in late April. We were standing in the yard behind his workshop, the same patch of grass where he'd proposed when he said, "What about right here?" I looked at the space. Gravel driveway, old maple tree, the workshop with its wide double doors propped open, sawdust still caught in the evening light. No ballroom, no chandeliers, no 80-person seating chart. "How many people?" I asked. 40. "That's less than half of what Mom invited to the engagement party." I know, he smiled. "It's also twice as many as Ruth and George had. We planned everything ourselves. Nate built the tables from white oak, long communal boards, no head table, no hierarchy. I arranged wild flowers in mason jars. We strung lights between the maple tree and the workshop eve, the same ones from the proposal night. Brooke called the following week. "Can I be your maid of honor? You were always going to be," I said. Greg texted, "Would you still let your old man walk you down the aisle? Wouldn't have it any other way, Dad." And then the message I didn't expect from Vivan. No phone call, no grand speech, just a text, 3 lines long. "Do you need help with anything for the wedding?" 8 words, no suggestions, no opinions. "No, you should consider the country club instead." Just an offer to help framed as a question with no strings attached. From anyone else, it would have been ordinary. From Vivan, it was a revolution. I typed back, "You could bring your pasta." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Okay, 1 word, no follow-up. "No, but pasta at a wedding is unusual." "No." "Are you sure you don't want the caterer I used for Brooks?" "Just okay." I saved that text. I'll probably keep it forever. I want to be honest with you for a minute. Not narrator honest. Not the kind of honest where I wrap everything up with a bow and tell you I've healed. The real kind. I don't tell this story to teach anyone how to deal with a difficult parent. Every family is different. Every mother is different. Every breaking point is different. But there's one thing I know for certain because I lived it for 29 years and I'm only now seeing it clearly. Silence is not peace. Silence is permission. Every time I laughed off one of Vivian's comments, every time I made excuses for her at Thanksgiving, every time I told Nate that's just how she is, I wasn't keeping the peace. It was keeping her comfortable, and the cost of her comfort was my dignity. Nate didn't save me. I want to be clear about that. He didn't ride in and rescue the damsel from the dragon. He asked me a question. If a patient told you her mother said that, what would you tell her? And I answered it. I saved myself. He just held the mirror steady. The ring on my finger doesn't have a diamond. It has a sapphire that belonged to a woman named Ruth Hollies who wore it for 41 years without ever once asking what it was worth. It has 3 months of design sketches from a man who works with his hands. It has the sky on the morning 2 people met. If someone in your life is measuring your worth by what you wear on your finger, by the car in your driveway, by the salary on your tax return, I want you to hear this. You are not the ring. You are not the carrot. You are the story behind it. And that story belongs to you. No one gets to grade it. 3 months after the engagement party, here's where things stand. Vivan has been to 6 therapy sessions with Dr. Mercer. She hasn't become a different person. Anyone who tells you therapy works that fast is selling something. But twice in the past month, she started to say something about Brooke's house or Tyler's new car and then stopped herself. Mid-sentence, mouth open, words half-formed, then a pause and a redirect. It's small. It's visible. It's enough. Greg talks more. At family dinners, the ones we've started having again at our place around the table Nate built. Greg tells stories now about jobs he worked on, about the bridge he helped engineer outside Charlottesville in 1998, about the time he accidentally ordered 800 lb of concrete instead of 80. He laughs at his own stories. Vivian listens. Sometimes she even asks follow-up questions. Brooke calls me every few days, not to manage a crisis, just to talk.